back. Damn.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever we might be in the world. I think my internet's being a bit dodgy on us here, and it seems to only be the three of us at the minute, so we might as well start with perhaps the most important story of the week, which is how Bruce has upset the authorities yet again. Or still, I suppose, is what we should say. So, are you on speaking terms with the mayor yet?
I don't know. Well, she's not on listening terms with me, put it that way. I can talk, but she's not listening. Oh dear. It's not the first time, is it? If people have been watching my channel, they'll see that for years now I've been bringing up the safety issues at our airfield, and for years I've been ignored. Even though the mayor says they've tried to work with me, their idea of working with me is to say, come in and talk to us, and then completely do nothing. That's how they work with me. And so I've done my bit. But yeah, it's unbelievable. It's going to be very interesting. In a couple of 3 weeks' time, we have some drag racing at the airfield. And I will be very interested to see whether the crosses are now placed in the right place or whether they're going to be placed in the wrong place. Again, because as I say, nobody really listens. And I don't know, but this has certainly got the community in a bit of an uproar. There's been a lot of people speaking not favourably of the mayor and her attempts to abolish free speech.
And so where were they putting the crosses on the airfield? On the grass, not on the end of the runway?
Yeah, according to the regulations, section 139, the crosses must be placed 1/3 and 2/3 from the ends of the runway. Now, this is where a little bit of confusion comes in, because the runway is generally deemed to be from threshold to threshold, and the thresholds are marked by the white lines. So, but what the councillor said, oh no, our runway's got all this grass on the end, so we are 1/3 from the end of the runway because it's got the grass runoffs. But the aviation, or everyone I've spoken to in aviation and CAA themselves have said, no, it should be 1/3 from the threshold at each end. And therefore it should be on the tarmac. And of course the council, in their wisdom, even though I have proven them wrong on so many occasions in terms of their understanding of the rules, because they don't understand a thing, they've said it doesn't matter if there are crosses.
Because I can't hear any of you yet, so bear with me.
Yeah, we will. They've said it doesn't matter if there's crosses because the NOTAM closes the runway. They don't understand that NOTAMs are purely advisory and have no legal status in terms of closing anything. They just advise you that this runway will be closed. It's the crosses that close them. But no, we know best, and they won't listen to anyone, not even CAA. They won't even listen to CAA. I can hear myself.
Yeah, so
this sounds great.
You're about to hear me through my speakers. I apologise.
You're very loud, Ian.
He's from Yorkshire.
I'll try and turn myself down.
Yeah. I'll turn you down. No. How's that? You've heard that before from many a woman, haven't you? Yes.
Lots of feedback loop there, Ian.
We're all echo is like talking in a tin can. Oh, that's better. No, you can still hear me. Put your headphones on, Ian.
Hang on. Give me a second.
Things he could have done 5 minutes before we started.
I've been doing this for the last half an hour. I've had to move my computer, so I've had to sort the mic and everything.
There we are. We're getting better now. That was nearly perfect. Yeah, well, the things with the grass runoffs at the end of the runways is there'd be no pavement classification number for those because they wouldn't have been tested. Whereas and James is here as well. Whereas your runway itself is the official bit for that. Just chuck in pavement classification number if you haven't already.
The other thing though is that what most aviators seem to have been thinking is when they see white crosses on the grass before the runway, their interpretation is don't use the grass. Because the grass could be wet, it could be whatever. That's the way most of them have been interpreting it. That's what they tell us anyway. So because it's not in compliance with what they believe the regulations are, they think, well, this is just telling us don't use the grass because it's too long or there's potholes or something. We'll just use the tarmac, and that's what they've been doing. So they're thinking the runway's open, and it's not, because the council hasn't been putting the crosses in the right place. And the council probably will still continue to put crosses in the wrong place, even though I've told them, CAA's told them, everybody's told them, but they know best because they are who they are.
Is there an official airfield manager?
No, there's no one. What they do is they delegate responsibility to some minion who knows nothing. The last with the current person is a lovely little woman, but she knows nothing about aviation or anything. She's basically, one step up from tea lady. And so that person cops all the flack, but they can't make any decisions. The way the council works is they delegate responsibility, but not authority. So the higher level manager, he still has the authority to make decisions, but if something goes wrong, the poor little woman at the bottom gets the blame. It's terrible.
Shame.
And the worst thing is about that whoever put out those white marks, if an aircraft came into land and there was someone on the runway doing maintenance and they weren't seen to the very last second and there was an accident, it wouldn't be the mayor getting in trouble because it would be the person that put the cross out.
That's right. But the reason that I've been forbidden from speaking is because I think the mayor's very much aware that there are risks involved here. And because I've been to them privately and said, look, do this. No, they're not interested. When it becomes a matter of public record, it's much harder to have this plausible deniability. We didn't know this was happening. Goodness me, our staff have let us down. But when you state it in public and it's minuted and recorded, they can't use that plausible deniability. So that's why they don't want me speaking, because it basically puts them at risk of being responsible. They don't want to be responsible. Better to silence the bad news than to actually have to deal with the problems.
Yes.
And changing that procedure is like nothing for them. It's no hassle at all to change it to the correct procedure to stop all the problems. Yeah,
well, I suggested a solution because this is a multi-use facility. So when it is closed, it's usually because there's vehicles or something on the runway. It might be drag racing or driver training, stuff like that. And of course, it's very hard to run a drag race across a white cross if it's made of vinyl or something, But I suggested you get out there with some water-based poster paint, you paint the crosses on with big white crosses with water-based poster paint, and at the end of the day, you just hose it off. Simple solution. I don't just go and criticize. I try and provide constructive solutions when I can. And so hopefully that's what they'll do. But of course, in the case of a drag race, they may have to repaint it several times during the day as the vehicles go across with spinning tires, but that's not my problem.
Yeah, I see Phillips. Here we go. I see Phillips in the comments, so I'd better do this because Phillips there. Hello, Philip. It's still here.
Where did you get that from? I'm the only one without one. Man, send me one. I'll melt it down and sell it.
I paid a Bitcoin for it. A whole Bitcoin.
Tell Philip to join.
Tell Philip to join. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Hang on. I'll send Philip. I'm about to send you an email. Everyone else, chat amongst yourself while we're here. Well, let's jump straight into the reason Ian's here, because James has got some positive news, so we can go later to James, and James can join in after. We can all be happy then. But AirMap, and I don't want to have to say it, but I've not emailed Philip yet. But I told you so. I told you so. Bruce has told you. We've all told you so. We've told you so. We've actually told. Ian's told you as well. We've all told you so. What should we do about it, Ian?
I think. Can you hear me okay? First of all.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Oh. At least I'm not mentioning the word Gatwick. Oops. So yeah. Well, at least it was good of AirMap to spill the beans. I think that just shows their level of confidence with it all now, and the narrative that they that really builds their business case around that. They're quite happy to just tweet it out. Oh, here you come. We're selling this now to governments on the basis that they can apply taxation based on your information they hold about your drone and where you are and your GPS locations, so that they can then do takeoff taxes, landing taxes, how long you're flying in the air taxes. You've done a loop-de-loop, that's another tax. So they can set up, charging as you fly, which is what we've been fearing all along with the apps, because it's basically one way that there's a few angles we're trying to sell them to the governments. It'll be, we can raise you these fees, so it offsets your costs. And safety. And Gatwick, drone users, they're all careless or criminal. And it's all that sales pitch that's being used to flog it. Now, it'd been interesting to go back and look at the numbers, and it's something you might have, Gary, but not to hand. But I do recall when there was the consultation that everyone was like, the vast majority of the feedback was, no, we don't want these applications. We don't want to send in a flight plan to just do our very simple roof inspection that we need to do. And yet, that's essentially they've asked, do you want all this? And we've all said no. And then quietly behind the scenes, it's going on of, well, you're getting it all anyway, because really, it's all been solved for. We need all this for the beyond visual line of sight, which it'll make a lot of that easier, but you don't have to have all that to do that solution. It is one solution to doing that. But that is of no relevance to the majority of people out there already. So the way it's being sold is the people that are out there already, you're the 10%. So the commercial operators, like you're 10%. You're 10%, basically you're nothing. And the assumption is all the Amazon stuff and deliveries, it's a guaranteed it'll work, it'll be profitable and so on. No one knows it will be, but that's the assumption. Oh, and you're all going to be flying in air taxis. We've already got helicopters. It's perfectly good technology. We've got one with a load of firmware in it. When firmware goes wrong, it's going to crash out the sky like a brick. But everyone's going to want that. And it's like, well, no, that's not proven either. But basically, the assumption is all that's going to happen. All us that are there now at the moment, we're all in the way of it. We're blocking it all. We're the old fuddy-duddies that are stopping it all happening. And really, the reality is that, fair enough, if you want to do that technology and those people that want to use it want to fund it, fair enough. But basically, that's not going to happen. There's been that few people using it. They're not going to be funding it. And what they'll do is they'll say, if you're a commercial operator, we're dumping this on you. And then they'll find actually with so few commercial operators, just as with the database, they can't actually fund it because there aren't enough of them. So then it'll be, let's find some way of putting this on all the hobbyists as well. And everyone foots the bill. And we know when it comes to governments, the people behind these, the companies, there'll be a huge contract workforce staff, and there'll be money just everywhere. It'll be like, it's a government money, spend it however you like. So it's full on gravy train. And this thing will turn like in the database, but it's very straightforward. And even then, everyone was going, oh, well, it must have the police connection. It must have this. And none of it. It was, it's a straightforward system, huge price. So here, if you get a lovely, complex, fantastic system, endless millions, who knows, and then that's going to be dumped on somebody. Now, that's the concern, is that the operators are out there already. This doesn't give them any benefit. If I've got a roof inspection to do, which you can do now perfectly fine, fly up Mavic, take the photos down, straightforward operation, and you've made it complex. You put another layer of complexity in there. I've got to have this app. This app is then going to influence the way I do that plan, because as people said already, if you're going to tax somebody to take off on land, they're then going to become inherently, you're going to have more accidents. You're going to make them less safe, because you've suddenly made it, if they have an operation where they conduct themselves very responsibly in the land well before the battery's being used, you've suddenly penalised them financially for that. So they're going to stay up in the sky longer. And that's problems, because it's not only the battery, you're using more of it before you land to be less landing, take off less tax. You're going to be more fatigued, because your mission, where you would have separated that into 3, 4, 5 landings, you're going to try and do that as one mission to have one tax. So you're actually creating a lot of problems around that no one's actually contemplated or thought about, because all the thought at the moment is, this is a computer system, it's going to make piles of money, and that's a great thing. And really, the complexity around it is, I think that the idea is all be using 5G. You put in, and that's why, your BTs and your Vodafones, that money, again, it's a cash cow. It's loads of money where there doesn't need to be any. And you're putting another layer of complexity in there, an operator that could be just, all your visual line of sight operators at the moment, it gives them no benefits at all. You're just adding more complexity, more cost. And that's the problem. And those are the people that aren't being asked. You should be asking, all the people you're going to dump the system on should have a voice.
Ooh,
now, if what you said was true, then why didn't the registration system for drones cost like 4 million quid or so? Oh, hang on. But surely remote ID will solve the remote ID will stop these drones from crashing, because you're trying to get 99% of your battery used.
Yeah.
I think you're missing the point, Ian.
Much safer. And good evening to you there, Phil, or good morning to you there, Philip. I think we must remember and put into this equation that air maps started out being called no-fly zone. And from day one, their original rollout was to allow landowners to pay a subscription fee to stop drones flying over their homes. So from day one,
it was actually, but the way it was, just to correct on that, if you were residential, you wouldn't pay anything. But if you were business and wanted to stop drones, you would pay a fee. And all the manufacturers like DJI and the 3DR, as it was then, and so on, were going to have to pay for this data. And straight away, obviously, even then, drone users were saying, we don't want any of this malarkey. And a few of us were trolling it by actually putting the operators, the manufacturers of drones, actually putting their plants as no-fly zones to make the point that actually this is, anyone can do this. Because again, it wasn't being validated. So you could just start picking addresses out and making them no-fly zones.
Yes. I'd forgotten that.
Yeah, but
I'd forgotten that. Yes,
you're quite right. And he's been pulled up on Twitter about this. He keeps going, the CEO of AirMap, I'm so righteous, I've only done things for the industry. But it's his very first business model. And the video is still on YouTube. It was absolute scaremongering. This thing was written. It was like the mother and the kids and drone about, it's invading our privacy and all this. And it's like, drones are evil. You need to set a no-fly zone above your house. And one of the UTM providers at the minute in the US is lobbying for that exact same thing, saying every household should have the right to block drones, or if drones are going to fly across, it'll be a corridor for which there'll be a taxation, for which they'll take a percentage and pass the rest on to that landowner.
Yeah. I think the key for me, is if when you're looking at the solutions here, is anything that requires the force of the regulator to make it work is a bad solution. There's already mechanisms in place, I think, to actually make beyond visual line of sight a reality and to integrate drones into airspace. You've got the ACP process, and that has to, the CAA under Cap 722C, you have to consider the rights of all airspace users to be able to put that into place. And so, I think all the mechanisms are there already. We don't need any more regulation. Less regulation, more innovation, I think, is the key. And when I hear of people saying, right, well, you're going to have to mandate people to do this or mandate people to do that. Well, that people can change the rules in certain airspace. I think there does need to be airspace change because we're still living in a world which is sort of being built up without drones. Airspace isn't made for drones; it's made for manned aircraft. But that can happen. There's a process for doing that, and it has to take into account all airspace users, whether that's drone hobbyists, commercial drone operators, and the big commercial airliners. And it mustn't. I don't see why there necessarily needs to be a fee. I think there's technology solutions that, as you've already stated, remote ID is something that's already been mandated. So, within the next 2 years, every drone will have to be transmitting its position. So there are possible ways that you can know where drones are going to be operating. But I don't like the idea of no-fly zones. I think that's crazy, and I don't think hobbyists should be paying. They can pay for, maybe they can pay for convenience, but there certainly shouldn't be a cost involved, or a forced cost involved anyway.
Well, thankfully, the CA did publish the new cap, was it E, that said we cannot be charged to access the airspace. Thank goodness in the UK, they were clear as, and anyone that comes up with a UTM in the UK technically has to come up with a way for us to be able to fly and not get charged as such. However, if you go and look at the Guardian Angel app, it now says, if you click on any flight restriction zone, it says UTM not available. And it gives you a nice little statement about UTMs. And you can see Guardian Angels now trying to, in their Guardian app, that they're after UTMs at flight restriction zones and everything.
Yeah, I mean, my concern is just because something at the moment says you can't be charged, I think pressure will come down the line in future, and that's what my concern is. I've not seen anything. You're welcome find it and then show me if there has been there, but I've not seen Nats in singing and dancing about a relationship with AirMap.
God, if only someone had done some freedom of information requests and found some sort of connection. If only
Yeah,
that happened.
the funny thing is, I wasn't even looking for anything to do with that. All I was trying to do with just various freedom of information things. They've been more about previous issues and Gatwick, and there was something else. And I was just trying to get a feel for the way drone users were being talked about behind closed doors, as it were. And then obviously amongst that text, there was an email, and then that in itself just says, well, I mean, my concern is partly that if you're having the relationships like that, why isn't that kind of your blog and on your website? It kind of suggests some of these things they're happening without wanting to make them known, because they'll be a little bit concerned about maybe the way it looks and the plans that are coming down the line. But when you consider the ex-CEO of NATS went off to AirMap to be an advisor, that means he's got a lot of contacts and networking here with the UK airspace. So he's then in a position where we know it's a company that all they're interested in is monetizing the sky, that he's going to be facilitating that. And, that does concern me. And that is something we should all be aware of and have more visibility of, because it does raise alarm bells. And when you see the conversations between the CAA and DFT and that all about AirMap, they're all lapping it up. They all think it's, all these things are wonderful. And no one's actually, there doesn't seem to be any conversation there of, wait a minute, we've had a consultation. The drone users have overwhelmingly said they're not interested in this being forced on them. There should all be that discussion first. Don't be going ahead and giving us solutions we don't want if you're planning on dumping them on all of us. By all means, if you've got a select use cases that need that and they want that, fine. But as we know, that the whole business model around AirMap throughout its life and before it was AirMap has all been around all drone users and as specific gone after your hobbyist users. So that just doesn't bode well. So I do think that, there needs to be more people putting in freedom of information, getting some of this out there. Because if they're not going to put this into the public domain, then we need to extract that. And the funny thing with NATS is I had actually sent in a freedom of information request because I know they're about 50% publicly owned. So I wasn't sure where that stood with the freedom of information, because obviously a public body, if you get information, it's private, you can't. So I thought, well, I'll give it a go. And they will answer some stuff, but basically, because I said, can you tell me about your relationship with AirMap? It was, no, we don't have to, we're not going there. But they interact, everyone they interact with is a public body, and they're all accessible via the Freedom of Information Act. And the concerning thing then is when you start, that then made me have a look, just sort of double check some of the stuff in the past. And it was like when we had the consultation, NATS had sent an email to the CAA that said, this is our suggestion, and went on about the airport restriction zone, all that more or less common sense, although they hadn't picked up on the fact that the change to putting 250s 4 miles away that are flying below tree line, needing to call ATC was daft. But that aside, they included the AOA, which was the Airports Association, and then a load of hysterical drone nonsense. Basically said that a drone can do the same physical impact. The implication was the same physical impact as a motor vehicle, which we know isn't true. But this was part of the submission. And then obviously it says on submission as well, please keep our views confidential, which means, again, we're being hysterical about drone users, but please don't tell anyone we are. That kind of stuff, it's, doesn't leave a great taste in your mouth when you read it. It's, you get the feeling really that there's a lot of people here looking to line their pockets with software solutions, using drones and scaremongering.
Well,
and is it any wonder that any one of the big players are Google and Amazon, eh?
Any wonder. But very frightening, and I want to bring evening to Louis, and I want to bring Philip in because he's going to stop snake oil, so that's fantastic. I'm very keen to hear exactly how he's going to do
I don't want my snake squeaking. I need snake oil.
That's right, we need oil. We need to oil our snakes. But that's
sorry.
anyway.
Philip is forbidden to fly drones inside house. So
Well, that's Australia, yes.
yeah, so we only can fly on a simulator.
But before I bring Philip in, I just wanted to mention that this afternoon in America, the UAS office is changing its name to the AAM office, which will seem trivial and seem nonsense, but I think that's a very key change that they've announced this afternoon at the Advanced Air Mobility Conference, that they're ramping it up. They're getting ready to chuck the smaller stuff to the dirt or not care, or be, I'm just pulling this out there, be really influenced by Google and Amazon, because they're running and the major advisors to AAM. So this is the next thing that we're going to discover in 2 or 3 years' time when everyone wakes up. But anyway, Philip, that's my tiny rant. First of all, Philip, amazeballs. What can I say? Thank you so very, very much for sending this.
Welcome, Gary.
I don't want to fly it. Don't want to fly it.
That's right. Mine's sitting on my bedside table because I'm not really going to do anything with it either. But anyway.
So snake oil, how are we going to get rid of it then? It's what this industry runs on. It is that it must have the world's supply of snake oil. Yeah,
look, I mean, unfortunately, it's what the world runs on at the moment. I'm going to give an example that is completely unrelated to this industry. It's something I had a bit of a rant on Facebook about the other day, and that's young drivers and lowered vehicles. Now, why is it, with all of the things going on in the world that people can actually kill themselves doing, why is it that we spend police resources going up to kids that have spent all of their life savings, not that they have many, but all of their life savings on their pride and joy, 1990s Japanese car that they've bought secondhand and they've polished to an inch of its clear coat, and they've put a set of coilovers on it, or they've done whatever, and it just looks a little bit cooler. But for some reason, that's an important road safety issue. And the best response I got from a former police officer was, that's because the road traffic, construction people know that they've got this amount of clearance for the quality of their roads. Now, I'm sorry, isn't this amount of clearance for quality of roads a much bigger issue than young people dropping their cars and damaging their own cars because of shoddy roads? Like, it's just where legislation heads. It's really easy for governments to whip up, or people to whip up, a bit of a scaremongering thing. A car might hit a pothole and careen off the road. Ban lowered cars. When the reality is, what the politicians are liking about that solution is, by deflecting this blame on hoons and young drivers and reckless drivers, what they've just done is save billions of dollars on actually putting line markings in, filling potholes in, building roads that last more than a year. Like, the billions and billions they save by throwing the blame onto a group of disenfranchised people that can't have a big enough voice because they're seen as troublemakers or hoons or this, that, and the other. It's just so easy. And the same can be said for especially FPV flyers. Like, what happens in a local park, buzzing around doing stuff? I don't have the eye-hand coordination to do FPV flying, which is, why I got into autopilots, because I just can't do it, the darn things. But these guys are causing zero problems for anyone. But there are some serious issues going on in the industry. I had a debate on LinkedIn in a private message with someone who sells counter UAS stuff, asking if, rather than the industry being snake oil, would I work with the industry to help them be able to do their job properly? And my answer is no. I'm not helping you bring down our aircraft. Our aircraft are perfectly capable of staying in the air and avoiding every system that is actually out there to bring it down. And that scares these companies, because they know they cannot actually successfully bring our aircraft down unless we use the right link. Well,
exactly.
Like, I'm sorry, but yeah, you've got a system that can take down a DJI because you worked with DJI to get all the little special keys. That's not something clever, and that's something that should have been maybe given to government. It's not something that should be given to the private sector. I've worked with our Five Eyes group to ensure that they have the right information necessary for national defence of appropriate countries. And I have no problem working with a sovereign government to make sure that they can protect what they need to protect. However, working with commercial companies to tell them how to take down a drone that could be a government drone, it could be a police drone, it could be a life-saving, it could be firefighting, it could be doing medical response. And, oh, you see a drone, oh, it's a threat, let's pull it down with some drone shield piece of rubbish. It's
interesting you saying that, because really what they're asking you to do there is give them information so they can monetize that into a really expensive cost to then lump onto the taxpayer for this counter-drone system, which they'll take the credit for, when really all they've done is approach the manufacturers and say, give us the loopholes so we can take it down, which, I think that's a lot. You've shown a lot of integrity there. And that, there will be companies that might say, yeah, we'll give you it for a cost. And you said, no, you're not having it because you're just going to sell it on. But if you're a government and you need it legitimately, then you can have that information.
It's so easy to put a law in place to damage an industry. And that's what we're seeing in this industry. And we're seeing commercial companies taking advantage of this to twist and damage an industry further. And you get people online saying, well, what can we do about it? Well, what we can do about it is exactly what everyone here is doing about it. And that's actually speaking up. It is a really difficult environment to speak up on a topic that may not suit, dare I sound like someone from America, the mainstream narrative, and to go against fake news. But we really are in a toxic environment in the world in general at the moment for getting accurate information, for getting information out in an appropriate way. It is too easy for big organizations, i.e. Google, to adjust search results. It just, news stories that don't suit the narrative disappear.
Well, you get your own personalised news, don't you? That's the advantage of the modern world. You don't have to buy a newspaper where you're force-fed stuff. You're told the things you really want to hear, and that's the danger, isn't it? And I don't think many people realise that if we all put the same thing into the search engine, but we wouldn't dare put anything Bruce would put into a search engine.
No. And how's the RX-7 going, mate? How's the RX-7 going since those coilovers you put on it?
But we don't get different results, and not many people sort of realize that they'd be roughly the same but also a little bit different and tailored, and that is a problem. But this story, along with many others, people in Europe seem to have just woken up. A lot of people in the model community have just woken up to the fact that the rules have changed in 2021, and there's going to be C numbers and this and that and the other, and it's all what's this, what's that, when's this happening?
Come on. The other thing is that we've had this whole thing with they've threatened all these real draconian rules, and then they brought in some that are slightly less. So many people are going, well, this is great. This is so much better than it could have been. I mean, like, this strategy is used by governments all the time, and it's working so damn well. There are so many people out there counting their blessings that we didn't have worse regulation, and therefore accepting regulation that's really, really bad.
Well, the number, I know the number that I've heard. Sorry, I'll let you go and say anything. The number I've heard, and welcome the other Ian. The number I've heard for AirMat was €16 a flight. That was the number I heard put about. But I guarantee that's the number that will come out, and then they'll say, well, all right, look, we scratched our head. We've done the best we can. We're going to take it down to... Exactly. It'll be 4, or it'll be this simple monthly fee. Look, we've done the best we can for you. And then our community go, oh, win! We did it.
What happened with registration costs in the UK? How much were they going to be? £16 something? They dropped it down. It's yes.
No, guys, you're wrong. Netflix is going to take over, and you'll get the monthly subscription, and everything you can fly, it's yours.
Yeah, Netflix. Well, but I think, to be fair to some of the other UTMs now, because you know I like Richard and Co. I think they're.
Sorry, I forgot. You'll have also Disney Plus also.
Disney Plus. So we can't get that here. So see, straight away that's an issue. That would be an issue for me. Can't get that.
And remember, you'll get the Daily Wire version for the Conservatives.
Gary, you need NordVPN.
There you go. Run all our drones through that, exactly. But there are a few people that, unfortunately, there are a couple of UTMs that I think have been quite reasonable and thinking the big picture, but they're getting drowned out by, and there are some of the early players are being drowned out by some
Altitude Angel. Well, I mean, Altitude Angel's been doing some really good stuff, and they've worked well with the industry on a more of a informative approach rather than coming down and hammering no-fly zones and things like that. It's information and trying to get people working together so far.
Yeah, but it's well, where was I going to go? I was going to go with the sea regs and all that sort of thing. And if you probably don't pay attention really, if all you're doing is flying your model airplane down the park or down the local field every weekend, you get it out, you start thinking about your model airplane on Friday, because then on Saturday you're going to go and fly it. Then you put it away and you don't think about it again for the following Friday. So you haven't kept up with it all, very sadly. And so I don't want to say I told you so, but I told you so again. We've been the whole partly, and I'm not sure Patrick's in the comments, but part of the reason SUS News became a little bit more formal was we started seeing this coming in 2006. And in 2008, we got a URL, but it's been coming. It's been coming down the road. But we mustn't forget there are a lot of decent players in the game. We can't slam them all down with it.
And the counter UAS side of things, you can on the UTM side. Patrick has commented in comments. It isn't news until it hits Twitter, and unfortunately, he's right. I mean, the only reason we've suddenly got some traction on pushing this topic up again is because these idiots were stupid enough to actually tweet that, and then they went and deleted their tweet. Well, obviously,
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. Disappeared. But thankfully, all of us had screenshotted it. But anyway, but the reality is, yes. I mean, Patrick and you and many others in the industry have been banging on about this forever. I remember the meeting at 3D Robotics when the discussion about putting air map data into the controller at Solo, and they wanted to enforce no-fly zones at that point. And everyone at 3DR, including Chris at the time, were very anti the idea. And we have cars that can do 200 kilometers an hour. The road rules say 40 in particular areas. You don't want your car manufacturer to enforce those limits. But the argument could actually be said that on cars there's far more argument for doing something like that than there ever has been on cars, in as far as geofencing and zones, and heaven forbid we get people thinking that's a good idea in government. But at least in that one, there are deaths on the road. There are people dying every single day. There are across the world hundreds of people dying every single day on the roads. And we're not, we've still got cars in Australia. Like, I don't know if you guys have seen the Proton Jumbuck. I don't know what the equivalent of that little. It's a little tiny utility thing, and it is 0 safety star rated. You're in a 40-kilometer collision, you're probably going to die. Like, it is a lethal piece of equipment. It's on the road.
We've got the equivalent. We've got these new flying air taxis.
Yeah.
Well, it's just a shame that a lot of the innovation is being cut off at the knees, from youngsters going out of flying because they can't anymore, to making it harder for companies to develop stuff because of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And you're bob on that. The snake oil really is largely in the counter UAS industry.
Can I make one comment about commercial users? I mean, commercial users. I mean, Ian, you've run into this. a lot, but we've got a certain breed of commercial users that think that the unmanned airspace is God's gift to them and them alone. And they seem to, like, that most of them have turned up in the last 8 years or so, and for some reason they think that they're the experts in this field and that they built it up and blah blah blah. They're flying DJI's off-the-shelf DJI gear, or, you know, bigger, smaller, whatever. They have no clue how it runs, what it does, but they're a 747 pilot, or they're a, you know, whatever, engineer from aviation, blah blah blah. So they have all of these qualifications, and they want to lock the industry down so that they are the only ones that use it. But what they don't understand is that without communities like ArduPilot, heaven forbid I give a plug to PX4 as well, and, you know, Matrix Pilot and Paparazzi and Microcopter and OpenPilot and all of these other things, Betaflight, like, without all of these other groups that are around there actually pushing technology, driving technology, these guys would have no industry, because it didn't exist.
You're wrong there. No, you're wrong there, Philip. No, DJI invented the industry. You're wrong. You're wrong. They invented everything. You're wrong.
I forgot that.
Frustrating about it. Everything Philip said there is correct, and it is. It's that the whole industry around it, especially you've seen it in your open source software. You know, years before DJI had all the failed, you know, started adding redundant sensors and fail safes in the software. ArduPilot have been doing that for years, and it was all based off every experience, you know, every little hobbyist with the small drone that crashes into a tree, every single crash, every single malfunction, you know, the logs for that were going in and feeding into then how do we stop that happening next time. So you've had this iterate process over several years of improvement, you know, redundancy, and really it wasn't until 3DR came out with the Solo as a commercial product with that in, and then said, oh, we've got a flyaway guarantee that we then DJI then as a standard, it was then in your, I think your Phantom 4, it had, you know, redundant IMUs, and then you had redundant magnetometers and so on. And DJI saw, actually, this is a sales pitch as well, and you instill a level of confidence as well in your products. And you look at the DJI products now compared to when we started off. I remember the NAS, the stuff had clearly gone out, and it hadn't been quality control tested at all. There was blatant bugs in stuff where it didn't work. Where now it's rock solid. You know, I see commercial operators using your Mavic Pro, you know, all the time, and with total and complete trust. And you can now, because all those years of taking log files, looking at why a crash has happened and fixing that, have got us to a point where we're creating very, very robust drones. And this is the thing as well that annoys me, when this hysteria, especially about saying, oh, look at the hobbyists, is the stuff they are flying is safer now than it ever was. And every single year it is safer than last year. And that is continually happening. So really what the products they're flying, you know, the chances of a malfunction are very, very slim. And when we all started, you know, trees into it, you know, they weren't very well engineered, and the software wasn't capable of dealing with malfunction. It was always a case of switch to manual and you'll be all right, which was never true anyway. But that was the mantra that will solve everything. So yes, so I get that frustration, and the thing that I also add to that is your commercial pilot of the future is your hobbyist now, because a lot of the hobbyists, same as anyone that's commercial operator now, has been a hobbyist at some point. They've gone out there, they have practiced. It's not like you're born with a PIFCO or your equivalent. You go out there, you learn about drones first, and then you pay it because you know you've got a level of competency, and you can see, you know, a potential business case that you could go along. And so we shouldn't be using legislation to lock.
You know, I'm just going to do the advanced drone pilot of the future course. Hang on, which mission did I want it to go? Oh, right, but mission 3. There we are. Right, now I've done the whole thing now. That's where we're going. There's going to be no such thing as a remote pilot. Even now, the systems are going to be just within 10 years, they won't exist. Other than that.
I don't know how many of you have followed what's going on at Boeing Skunk Works Australia. I can only talk about what's actually in the media because, there's multiple companies with multiple NDAs and all that sort of stuff. But thankfully, there's enough stuff in the media to show what's going on. And we got jets that are flying around with, multiple redundant cube autopilot systems on board, doing all sorts of really cool swarming activities, full auto takeoff, full auto landing on fast jets, all using ArduPilot. And doing some just absolutely incredible stuff. And this is Boeing. So when they start saying, we shouldn't be using the hobbyist here, well, hang on a second. We're not. We're using the same gear Boeing use, NASA use, Airbus use, all of the certified delivery companies around the world, other than I think Zipline and Google Wing. Exclude them. The rest of them are using, a cube. Most of them are using ArduPilot. There's a few using other versions of Pixorgs with ArduPilot, or a few of them with PX4. But it's open source. It's hobbyist stuff that is running the commercial world. And your mate John, who's extremely professional with his training organization and this, that, and the other, and he's using ArduPilot on a cube. Now he doesn't shout that out everywhere, and but that's how it works. That's what this industry runs on, and yet the talk level is all about DJI, and it's all about professional level, this, that, and the other. We are the professional level.
Well, you've got to get relevance for your small company, haven't you? Whatever your company is, inspecting whatever, doing whatever, you've got to say, I bought this, it was really expensive, therefore we must be really good. Every industry must have this.
That's a bit of a joke on why we made the gold cube 1 Bitcoin, because people have been complaining. We've actually got serious complaints from commercial operators that they want a version of our cube that's expensive, because they struggle to explain to someone that a $250 autopilot is what they should be using. They should be using a $4,000 or $10,000 or $30,000 autopilot. Now, if they want an expensive autopilot, we do have the Cube Gold for 1 Bitcoin. When we made it, that Bitcoin was like, I don't know, $15,000 or something. We thought that was silly enough. Apparently, the gold cube's worth 40 grand at the moment. But anyway, it's a bit of a joke. Needless to say,
hold on a minute, Gary.
Hey, get in.
I was going to say, when you said it was 1 Bitcoin, I did wonder. I was thinking, is this solid gold with like platinum and diamonds inside of it now?
No, sorry, gents, I've got to go. I've got to go to find somebody to pawn something. I'll be back in an hour.
I'm just mining my own cube. I'm mining my own cube on this graphics card here. Don't worry.
Yes, I'm mining cube mining.
and anyone who hasn't seen it, Ian from Mads Tech did a lovely little video for the cube that might be floating around somewhere. So it's
These
a nice
big YouTubers get all the free stuff. Jeez.
We do have Michael Bay's blessing. We just don't have Hasbro's blessing on that one, so can't officially do it.
We don't worry about things like that.
I thought you get all your swag from your makeup channel, Bruce, your beauty channel.
You can only wear so much guy liner, man.
Guy liner. I didn't know that was a thing. There are so many things in the world I don't know that are things, and that's one of the things I don't know that's a thing.
You mean you don't manscape? My goodness.
Goodness.
You know what the auto-generated ads for this video are going to be now?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. No, don't worry.
You think
Bruce.
they're not going to demonetize this?
Yeah. Bruce will get it demonetized very, very shortly. It's bound to happen as night follows day. Let's just quickly, we've had a quick 49 minutes. So the bottom line is don't use AirMap. That's the bottom line.
And generally be just wary of the UTM Trojan horse for taxation and make sure that, if that starts to come about, that we all jump up and down and shout about it. Because someone has said in the comments quite rightly, we may be speaking up, but who is really listening? And
nobody.
What some people started doing on AirMap, but a lots haven't. But really, one way of doing it at the moment is they're removing the AirMap app, but forgetting to leave a 1-star review. Leave a 1-star review. Say, I'm not happy with your business approach to drone users. And anyone else that's going to do an app is do that and make it known, because it's a little bit of futile protest, but it will still get noticed. It'll get noticed by the marketing people, and at least you can say, you can kick and scream about this, and that's what we need to start doing, is being a lot more vocal. We're far too passive and just, as Bruce says, it could have been worse, but no, there's going to become a point where we've gone so far down the road that so many people, a lot of people already are just dropping out of being hobbyists, and even some commercial operators, because they're just saying, I'm just getting fed up with the complete total bombardment all the time, and why drones and the industry are that so negative. So we've got to do some pushback.
Have you looked at the unmanned aircraft bill? Because that's going through its rounds again at the moment, isn't it? And I believe there's some stuff about UTM in that. So all I would say is, if you've got concerns, look at the regulation that's about to come. Look at the regulation, because that's where it's going to come from. The only way they're going to enforce something upon you is with a law saying you have to do something. Yeah. So that's the angle where any changes will come from, and you can make your own judgment as to whether it's good or not. I believe I haven't read it for a long time, so I can't remember what was in it, but I remember probably about 18 months ago, the last time it was going through its round, and they got distracted, I think, by Brexit. But it's going. I think I saw something the other day that it's regurgitated again. So it's worth having a look at that, just to see what's in it, and to see if there's anything that might be of interest.
Well, I'll let us jump nicely to James there, actually, because we've just been mentioning advanced air mobility, flying cars, how we ate it all, and UTMs and all stuff. Didn't you win a contract for that just today in the West Country of England, James?
Yeah, so we've got a project which is basically looking at understanding the full feasibility assessment of doing urban air mobility, and we're doing it down at Bristol. So I don't know if you've ever tried driving around that area, but it's impossible.
I was born there, mate.
You've got like a horseshoe shape, and the bit in the middle is basically a bridge, and everything. If you want to get from one side to the other, you have to all go around that way. And I don't know if you Phil, but sort of Cornwall and Wales area, you've got a sort of stretch of channel, but there is a clear use case there for urban air mobility, in terms of getting people around quicker. So what we're doing is
a lot of work on your research. I mean, take the money, by all means, take the money, but just the end result is just helicopter.
No, I completely agree. I think
trebuchet. Never underestimate the trebuchet.
The answer is The Boring Company by Elon Musk. That's the answer. Yeah. You don't want machines overflying people, where helicopters can even fall out of the sky. Very sadly, takes out a pub.
Oh, come on! Full-size aviation never has any problems.
We've had this month. This month, what are we at? The 26th, we've had 5 helicopter fatals in South Africa. One of them was a HEMS helicopter with such bad maintenance, and that took out 4. And when I was doing the ADSB, I didn't mention it. When I was looking at ADSB and not finding tracks in the carrier board of this cube because there's no aircraft about, I actually watched that aircraft before the incident on my bigger picture. I thought, oh, that's interesting. Look, there's the HEMS helicopter. And then it wasn't on the map anymore. And then I found out why. It wasn't. There is a nice balloon company in Bristol. Indeed. I love Camerons very much and dearly. But anyway, Yeah.
I think the thing with urban, I think if we look at the patterns with drones, like, you know, why are there not more helicopter type drones being used? You know, there are a few out there, but it's the mechanical complexity just puts a lot of people off because, you know, they cost pretty much the same as a drone. They've got better endurance. They can fly longer, but
the problem is, but helicopters actually about as simple as you can make a mechanical device is a modern, like I say modern, I'm going to bring up Dauphine, and I suppose they're not modern anymore. I'm showing my age, but the rotor head on a Dauphine doesn't even have hinges up there. It just flexes the center, and there's X number of hours. You replace it and put a new one on. It's so simple to maintain. It's so simple to use. Like helicopters have got so much evolution behind them. They're so proven. You're going to put ESCs up there and pretend that they're more simple because there's just one moving part on the rotor and the bearing, but there's everything else in the chain.
But I think this is the point, is because you've got single points of failure. It's the single points of failure which is the problem, and you know, when you start looking at helicopters and you look at that chain of events, there was quite a number of single points of failure in that, and that's why they have to be maintained to such a high rigor. And I don't know if you've ever done helicopter flying lessons, but you know, flying helicopters is expensive, and the only way you're going to bring that down is to bring down the running cost. If you can bring down the running cost.
The reason they're expensive is because they use a gas turbine engine, which is pretty much the most efficient engine that we have on the market at the moment. The reason that it's expensive, though, is because we're talking big vehicles, so therefore they have extremely big engines that are running a big disc and being very efficient for what they do. To try and suddenly replace that with electric, well, you need an electric motor that puts out the same amount of power for the given disc area to actually do that. And you start talking about massive. It's just
everything.
Well, let's
massive everything.
Fair to James there. Let's hang on. We didn't. It's not beat up James tonight. No, come on.
I'm not building a UAM vehicle, by the way. We're just what we do is applicable for both drones, UAM, and a range of other things as well. But I think there is a genuine benefit to going down the multi-rotor type route, and we've seen that within the drone sector. We saw an explosion in drone use once we went to multi-rotors because they were simple to maintain, they were easy to run, and the costs of.
Sorry, you're wrong. It's the control part. It's the control part that was made simple, and the control part is applicable to helicopters too. You can fly an helicopter as easy as you can fly a DJI Mini, and it's quite easy to do. On Autopilot, you just stick it there, and it flies just like a regular drone. It's no problem whatsoever. Sorry.
So why do you think helicopters haven't seen as great an adoption?
Because they're big machines.
What's that?
People remember the old days, and in the old days they were really, really hard to fly as a rotor control thing. My first rotor controlled helicopter I bought a month before I had my first marriage. It was my last hurrah boys purchase, supposedly, and then I got into this industry. But anyway, and I bought an OS 90 helicopter as my first attempt of helicopters, and I put a dent in a piece of concrete on our driveway because I was trying to fly it inside a carport, which I later learned was a dumb idea. The reality is back then they were really, really difficult to fly. Big machines, very complex mechanisms. Whereas now we're flying flybarless rotor heads. There's a flybar one. That's old school. But the modern ones are actually really simple. There's 3 servos, pretty much directly connected to the thing, and away you go. because now computers can do things better than they used to be able to do, so it's a lot easier. However, there is definitely still a case for multi-rotors when we're talking about deliveries. We're talking about, it's easier to shroud a multi-rotor and stuff like that. I mean, there's definitely room for both applications. But when we're talking about moving people, so we're talking about 2-ton vehicles and above sort of thing, then I just question where the argument for efficiency and safety goes when we're talking about helicopter versus a very complex multi-rotor.
Yeah, I don't think it is. I personally don't think it is about safety or efficiency at all. I think that those are kind of the symptoms. But at the end of the day, the CAA will only, the regulator will only approve it if it's safe enough to fly. So you have to hit that certain standard, and as part of that, you have to submit, a whole operational. But you have to have a maintenance schedule in place, which will ensure that aircraft will remain up in the air and isn't going to kill anyone. And I think that's where the multi-rotor does have significant advantages, and that impacts on operating costs.
Sorry. No, sorry, James. You can get a Robinson for the price of a high-end BMW. That's easy. What kills the running costs of the Robinson is all the scheduled maintenances, the fees that you have to pay to park it in an hangar and everything. Once you get multi-rotors that are obliged to the same rules, you'll have the same expenses times 4 as a minimum. So where is it going with the savings? And considering that energy efficient, an helicopter, it's way more efficient than a multi-rotor any day of the week.
And I think we've all conclusively proven that multi-rotors do not auto-rotate.
Yeah.
Yes, they do when 2 motors fail.
The biggest problem you're going to have, right, actually, isn't the maintenance costs or anything else. It'll be flight turnaround time, because a multi-rotor needs electricity. Okay,
not necessarily.
Not necessarily. You have the hydrogen, the hybrids.
True, it's young blood.
Unless you put a big generator in it, like the helicopter turbine. So it's either going to have a noisy turbine or engine in the back of this quad or this multi-rotor, whatever's doing the air flying, which just made it. You may as well have the helicopter. The helicopters fly all the time. You can literally go from point A to point B, back to point B, back to point A. You can do this all day with a helicopter. Just keep filling it up, which doesn't take that long. It does this
without the added weight of a generator.
I think the difference between
one of the problems with this industry is too many technologies get put into the equation at one time. I'm assuming, James, that your study isn't about necessarily which technology gets used in it. It's about actually doing the flight. So I know we have completely derailed the conversation there, but it happens on a regular basis. I would love to see more autonomous Robinson 44s doing urban transport, where we know the vehicle. Okay, I picked a really bad one with the Robinson 44 because they've got a terrible reputation. But in their defense, that's due to the fact that most training schools use them and student pilots, etc. And they're cheap. But use something that's proven, use something that's real, put an autopilot in that, and just test this bit. And we keep seeing companies coming out with a complete reinvention of aviation when that's not necessary. And look, I'm sorry that we're reinventing the wheel. I'm sorry that it sounds like we're trying to hijack what you're saying there, James, because obviously you're talking about the feasibility of air transport as urban mobility, not necessarily the technology chosen for.
Yeah,
well done, Philip.
What we're doing in the project, from our perspective, we don't really mind if it's the helicopter or the multi-rotor which wins. We just want to see these things flying as much as we can. Where what we're doing is actually providing, as soon as you take the pilot off board, you need to be able to see things. Everything needs to see each other, and drones are pretty small. It's quite hard to see them unless you speak to the Airprox board, and then it's very easy to see them. But yeah, no, they're very difficult to see, and manned aircraft to go and expect. Well, both parties, both drone and manned aircraft, need to be able to see each other. There is a regulatory requirement to be see and be seen, and so I think we can cover two things off here. Drones need to be seen somehow, and there's probably a bunch of ways that can happen. Every drone, as far as I know, out there has a telemetry link and is spitting out data. So there is a way to detect these things. And secondly, if you want to see, you need to be able to then see those. You need to be able to detect those signals, and whether that's ADS-B, whether that's radar, whether it's counter UAS, is actually I see counter UAS as potentially more of an enabling technology rather than a disabling technology. In terms of,
let's change it from counter UAS to anything else.
UAS awareness.
Yeah, UAS radar, we'll call it that. But yeah, it's I see sensors as being this is what we see. We see sensing as being a key requirement to be able to get the drone era to the next step. And so what we're doing is providing a service which allows aircraft that need that service to be able to see everything, all air traffic. Maybe not pigeons. BT, Vodafone. Well, funny you say that. Actually, I won't say any more than that. But yeah, there is some interesting stuff that we're doing there. But we'll come across that later.
Australia.
But there's definitely needs to be some infrastructure, is all I would say there.
I think as lovely as, and I'm jumping in now, as lovely as ADS-B is and stuff like this, I think we can all agree here that your ID here. Bit of a have we have a Philip early remote ID solution there? But we are digital aircraft. It's like, tell us how to do it. Oh, it's even got, what's the SD card for then?
It's way too big.
Yeah, what's the SD card for? We're digital aircraft in a modern sky. Now, funnily enough, in the comments, somebody mentioned Bristol having balloons, and this very evening I was summoned by the balloony types because they're getting worried about having to fit ADS-B now. And I said, if I was you, I would lean on the CA in England to make you use FLARM or open glider networks. It'll be much cheaper, much easier. Walla, 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 walla. So if you are there in Bristol, James, where the biggest balloon meet in the UK happens, you better go and speak to, again, Cameron Balloons in Bristol and have a word. Maybe terminal on top of their buildings there. But with digital aircraft, where was I going that? With digital aircraft, why on earth will we be constrained by old systems? Sure, and there's more of us than anybody else, so everyone else must join our standard. So there.
Well, what's a developing mode of thought actually in the industry at the moment? And I sit on the unmanned electronic conspicuity working group within the CAA. Is there's a lot of drone operators who want to do BV loss, and what they do is they apply for a 6-month period where they can put up a TDA, temporary danger area, and basically block it off from all other airspace users. And these are becoming more and more frequent. And GA are actually becoming more and more open to the idea of electronic conspicuity in some form or other. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be ADS-B. I think the CA are kind of open to seeing what the market decides it should be or what solutions there could be. And I think that's the right approach. But there's definitely a shift towards using the use of airspace change proposals to, instead of using temporary danger areas and segregating airspace, of actually saying, okay, well, here's a zone. If you want to fly in here, you have to be carrying something that allows you to be seen. And therefore, you're not forcing people to carry it. You still have to bear in mind people's equitable use of airspace and fairness there. And there needs to be a balance, because if there's 100 people or 100 operators who want to fly there, but they can't because, you know, Bob in his Spitfire won't put a device on board, then it's not really fair that those 100 people are grounded because one person doesn't want to go and stick a 300-pound device on their aircraft. So there needs to be a balance there. But that's the current regulatory check that's in place, is what's best for the majority of airspace users. And that process, I feel, I can see a solution there. I can see a real solution that's really where our mind is at, and what we've been building for. So, you know, it's going to be an interesting project, 18-month project, and you know, I think Vertical Aerospace are doing some really cool things, and I do disagree. I do see the need. I do see benefits in multi-rotors. I think it's that cost. It's the running cost. And there's a lot of people who spent a lot of money and used a lot of there's a lot of clever people who've done the business analysis of this. So I don't want to. I don't have the knowledge to be able to say yes, it's definitely going to be better, or no, it's not. But there's a lot of money gone into it. So I would imagine that the investors who've ploughed, you know, $1 billion into it have probably done their their checks.
A lot of people did that with the canals, though, didn't they? And then the railways came along.
I'm going to
go on, Ian.
Right. The reason multi-rotors have been picked by most businesses is they were able to walk out and pick one off the shelf. That's the very simplest reason most business case bought them, whether it be large or small companies, whether it be the IT department. The guy they've just hired to go out and buy one was able to go and get one and go, look what we've got now. I think we discussed this last week or the week before. There are companies who have asked to borrow UAS to sit in their foyer to make it look like they've got drone programs. Now, don't get me wrong, there is the odd company that has taken this very seriously. However, for the most part, outside of the industry, it's been quick, buy something because we need to be involved in this and get on with it. Multi-rotors has been chosen because the barrier to entry is lowest. There's a guy who Philip will know and many other will know, who's Rob. Rob set up a business building helicopters, and it wasn't the tech that was the problem. It was the barrier was in people's minds. That was where Rob struggled the most, and people not doing what they were told to bloody do with the aircraft in the first place with regards to maintenance and looking after it. So, but the thing with the multi-rotor is it's such a low barrier to entry right now. No one wants to look at anything else.
I can tell you as a professional user, each of our drones flies around 8 to 10 hours a day, and each drone has a running cost of batteries. That batteries do X number of cycles, so they have to be discarded. And so the running cost of a commercial off-the-shelf drone can amount to around 20% of its initial cost. So, yeah, if you want to do a viable commercial endeavor with drones, you have to account for that. And 15 to 20%, 25% as operating costs of that drone is not something to be aware of, that you have to be aware of.
I think there's definitely a case for delivery up to, let's say, 50 kilos, or maybe that even might be too much. But let's say there's definitely a case for that. I think you enter into weird territory when you start talking about putting people in them, and then the real need for it. So if I'm thinking about Bristol, which I do know very, very well, the actual centre of the city and getting stuff into there, it's a pretty congested place. You know, you'd still be, and I bet you they have really good bicycle infrastructure in Bristol. In fact, they do, don't they? They have all sorts of bike lanes, all that sort of a thing. How are you going to be looking at how that sort of thing is going to integrate with that, or can it beat it? So, are you going to be honest in looking at that? They'll already have some cool stuff there.
Sorry, just repeat that question. I missed the first bit of it.
Well, Bristol already has some pretty tidy infrastructure for deliveries in the centre of the city itself. So how are you going to look at that quite closely? And then
Definitely, yeah. The use case is a really big part of the project, and Atkins, who are part of S&V Lavalin, or I can never pronounce it, but big global group. They are doing a lot of work on the infrastructure piece with Skyports. So Skyport's sort of infrastructure part, sort of division, and so they're looking at, and they're working with, there's a number of stakeholders involved. So there are use case, genuine use cases where there's a lot of cost that's being applied to, by using traditional means of transportation, and the cliche is, speed of the air. With the cost of the road is the aim for urban air mobility, is trying to get that. And I don't they call it urban air mobility. I kind of think more of it as a suburban. I think the medium range flights is probably where it's at. Offshore as well is a huge one. Helicopters are going out to oil rigs regularly. And there are the number of times that these things go into the drink. It's not uncommon. Like, my stepfather was used to work on the oil rigs, and he's I think every couple of years he had to go through drills where they dunk you in a swimming pool, turn you upside down, you have to swim out. And so I think from that perspective, reliability is there are some improvements there that can be made, but it's also can be a lot. It can also be a damn sight cheaper as well. And I think there's going to be a lot of use cases that come out of this. There is a lot of water around, and there's you've got sort of two pieces of land which are separated by a huge piece of water. So the only option is either boat or drive all the way around. So I think if you can connect the two sides together, that's great. And Bristol Airport, there's a huge thing at the moment in terms of spreading out aviation across the country, rather than it being all sort of centered around these big, Heathrow's, Gatwick's, the big airports, is actually to see whether other airports can be utilized more to spread some of that load around. And urban air mobility may be a way to be able to do that, is with connecting flights between airports.
What about a hovercraft? Because that bay, all you need is a
hovercraft. They did that. They used to do that. There used to be hovercrafts across the. Ian will know. He'll have been on the hovercraft many times, I'm sure.
You can have a automated hovercraft. Drive your car on. It feels you get on it, and it could just take you across because it be Pixel driven, and it could literally hovercraft straight across, safer than flying.
Yeah, that should be very, very cheap. And then you are complaining about 16 euros per flight on a drone. Come on, be reasonable.
I think the problem with them is you generally are a bit more constrained about where you can go. With
hovercraft.
Well, you're docking at you then have to have connections to and from the ports. So if you're on the port and you want to get from the port to the port the other side, then yeah, completely agree with you. But if you're 20 miles away from the port, you then need a connecting journey to the port, then from the port to the other port, and then the same the other end. So it starts racking up.
Yeah, but the same with air mobility, because you've still got to get that aircraft into the middle of a city. It still has to land either on a building or in a car park. If it lands on a building, you need all the infrastructure for the elevators to take people up and down. So there's the pros and cons to both, I should think. But, just because something can fly doesn't mean it can land in the middle of a busy area or an urban area. You've still got to find that area where it's going to be safe for that aircraft to come down with those people on it. So I think it's a double-edged sword. But if it took a whole car onto this like hovercraft and whizzed it across, it could literally go inland a bit, because it wouldn't care if it's a road surface or grass surface or it's water. It doesn't actually really care.
So we've had these things. with that personal mobility transport thing, look at science magazines like Popular Science, Popular Mechanics. They've been promising these things for years, and the technology has been there by and large. Hiller had a flying platform which could have easily been turned into a urban mobility vehicle. They proposed a flying Jeep, which is very similar. We've had so many opportunities to do this, and it doesn't happen because the demand isn't there. The cost, the value proposition of that just doesn't exist. And yeah.
So I was just saying, I really think you've got to remove people from the picture. I don't think moving people about is going to be the big wow that people think it is. Moving cargo about, yeah, I get that. Yeah. I get that. I don't get moving people about.
I think one of the best use cases that I've seen recently for urban mobility is what the University of Maryland have been doing with their kidney transplants and eye transplants and stuff, where you're moving from a hospital here to a hospital 2 miles away, but to get from here to here via ambulance or whatever, the means of getting from here to here was really, really complicated in many cities, whereas to get from the top of a building to the top of another hospital is really, really easy with a RPAS of some sort.
Hyperloop. Those pneumatic tubes. When I was a kid, you go to the shops. Hyperloops, it's a dream. It's never going to happen. But when I was a kid, you go to the local store and they'd put your money in a little thing that would disappear into the building through a pneumatic tube, and then the change would come back with your receipt. And Elon Musk invented that, apparently, long after it happened.
It's funny you talk about the medical use case, because we've actually got an ongoing project called MediDrone, which we're working on, and I think we've got about 10 or 12 NHS trusts, hospitals, and end users who want to see this happen. And so it's going to, I think, the end of March we should have a big announcement, and then some exploitation beyond that. By that point COVID will probably be over, but well, actually I say that we hope it will be over, but knowing the way things have been going, we'll probably be going for the next 5 years. But there is medical is a clear one, because human life is valuable, and people will pay a lot of money to protect it. So if there are ways to be able to save people's lives, then the use case is clear and obvious. When you start talking about delivering a Domino's pizza, then your margins are a lot tighter. Put it that way.
Yes, well, it all dovetails though. It all dovetails, because like you have people flying these urban mobility vehicles, and when they crash, you need to get the medical supplies there really quickly, so you can use a drone. Yeah.
And they'll be hungry, so they need pizza.
Yeah, they will. They will.
Pizza's either. You want Starship system that's in Milton Keynes. That's
on the road
delivery. You don't use a flying drone. A flying drone can't deliver to 80% of a city. So
50 mentions zipline in the comments, and that's perhaps, again, I don't mean to.
Special use cases will always exist.
Yeah, but that's why. So Bristol is so well served. Everything's right there. You can walk. Bristol's a relatively small city, and then the stuff further out there. So the stuff that's going on in Scotland and Mull, that makes sense, because that's an island across quite a chunk of water, and a hoon of a long way around to go around in that case. It'll be very micro deliver. Now, didn't the CAA in their language introduce a new term this week? Micro deliver, something or other. Some language has changed.
John's comment covers it quite well. The most recent comment there. Moving cargo is all about efficiency and cost, aka trains, boats, and trucks, and aeroplanes if you're in a pinch. So all that remains is last mile transport. Now, going back to zipline is. That stuff's not available. The infrastructure is not there where Zipline are flying, and the work they do is incredible. And they're about long distance, critical supplies, medical supplies, plasma deliveries. Like, the work they do is incredible, and really got to applaud them for getting such complex infrastructure up and running in places where complex infrastructure is difficult. And they've done an amazing job. But that technology is very different to what you need in Bristol.
Yeah. Well, I think that when you look at it, in London, there's 2 hospitals they have deliveries between, And every day, like we're talking to careers who do this sort of stuff. So we're in quite big careers who do medical transport of whether it's blood or organs or whatever it is. But there is obviously London probably isn't the best place to start, but there are other use cases around the country as well, where they've got these regular routes and they have people on mopeds who have contracts to deliver between them. And it's not cheap to have that service on demand when you want it. They might be waiting around for an hour or so before the next delivery, so it's not like an Uber or a Just Eat or a Deliveroo where you literally you finish one delivery, you're straight onto the next one. It's a bit more it's more time critical, and having people waiting around isn't a problem, but that does increase the cost. So I think in the long term we will see some of these pizza deliveries and stuff like that eventually come through, and I will say that I think they will eventually come through, but they're not the first ones that are going to happen.
But in America, they're setting up mobile kitchens now, and they're using AI to work out people's eating patterns and guess the things that are going to, pizzas in particular, that are going to be bought. And they they make up the pizza at their factory unit, or they make up what they perceive will be the orders, and then they put them in a van, and then they cook them as the orders actually come in from nearby, and they're like within walking or bicycle distance of the unit that's cooked it. So in a lot of ways, we're presupposing things are going to be done in the same way in the future. Maybe things won't be done in a way that you need to have them delivered. I'm having a puppy. Sorry, James. Go on, Mark.
Here's the kicker, right? So you see mopeds take things from hospital to hospital. It won't be long before that will be a car or a van, and all you're going to do is load it, right? It'll never have a driver. It won't matter how long it sits around for, and you can have one on standby for emergencies if you want to. You'll chuck stuff in it. It'll carry more than a moped, so it'll carry 10 times the load. It'll carry half a ton. It'll carry a ton's worth of kit from hospital to hospital, and it'll just go on the road and off it goes. You just push the button, off it goes.
I'm guessing from that comment you've never driven in central London.
I was going to say the reason that they pick a moped is because traffic is at a standstill. Mopeds can dodge in and out of the traffic, but then you're adding a safety risk, because you've got these moped drivers that are like, I'm on a medical mission, but I'm more important than everyone else, and they drive like maniacs. And then you've got the risk of road accidents, road trauma, and all of that caused by that.
Governments do bike lanes all over the place, so they just have to reserve one of that ground space as an urgency lane for bicycles or drones or whatever that goes on the roads.
And the best delivery vehicle will be a 1990s Japanese car with lowered suspension.
That was exactly what I was thinking. Yeah. Now,
let's make the vehicle blue light itself. So while it's in motion, it's blue lighting. So traffic knows just to part. You could do that.
That won't work in many countries. Have you guys been to China? The police drive around with their lights flashing all the time. It's just like, hi, I'm a policeman. Don't get out of my way. I'm a policeman. I don't understand how they attend emergencies, because the lights are always on. They're parked on the side of the road. No one's in it. The lights are still on.
I think we live in an age at the moment where we all see things as black and white, and like nuance has all been lost in the current political debate anyway. And like with anything, is it going to be drones that do all the deliveries? Is it going to be autonomous cars which do all the deliveries? Is it going to be the Boring Company doing underground tunnels? Probably all three. And I think there's room for all three. And I wouldn't like to say that everything should go by drone, but I think there is a market for it. It's just a case of the market finding.
Isn't there something going on in Ireland at the minute with drone delivery as well?
Yeah.
Basically, it's a solution looking for a problem. We have a solution that is called drones, and we are looking what is the problem that best fits the solution we have on hand.
Well, look, the bottom line is congratulations, James, on getting the contract
Yes,
to do
yes,
that. And
don't-
daring to come on here and be ripped apart by
No,
us.
no, no, don't
Yeah,
be-
yeah.
We're all here for you. Yeah.
I like listening to difficult questions, because I think the only way to really test your ideas is to come up against people who can ask you difficult questions. And I don't want to be around people who are just going to be like, oh yeah, brilliant, that's fantastic, you know, it's all going to go perfectly, because actually you don't learn anything. So you know, it's good to hear from people who raise these points, so you take them on board. But you know, I think there still is a huge amount of uncertainty in the industry as to what applications will be the winners. We're already starting to see what those are. You know, if you look at a lot of the deliveries that are happening at the moment, I think most of them are offshore or island hopping. There's not much onshore stuff at the moment.
Yeah.
So medical deliveries offshore is the low-hanging fruit. You know, you could probably have someone flying it manually from site, and there'd still be a benefit there. You know,
James.
but by the time we go and get to, you know, grocery delivery, which is where Manor are focused, you need huge amounts of automation, like pretty much fully automated. You need huge scale to bring the cost down. And I dare say that will come. But it's just, I think there's going to need to be a big investment to go and get it to that point.
Don't worry, James. We're your support network. We're always here for you, mate.
Yeah.
So let's quickly get on to something I did want to cover is, what do we think? Let's have a bet. What is it then? And Ian also in Wales there. What is it that Sensefly are bringing out on the 2nd of February, whatever? Is it an eVTOL? Is it Blue SUS? What is it? What do we reckon?
eVTOL.
I think it's got to be eVTOL. Yeah, I think
Pizza delivery.
It looked to me like a tail sitting EB.
There's me thinking I reckon it's going to be 250 grams something or other, or a 900 grams something or other, to fully comply, and perhaps be the first thing with the C marking on it, because that would be interesting.
The thing is, if you look at their platform, the one bit that lets it down is getting it in the air. And I know it's fairly easy to do. You just got to chuck it. But that's the next evolution for them, is taking that away from the pilot, isn't it? And being able to just sit it on the deck. And, you know, their business model is a man turns up, places aircraft on the ground, hits a button, and it goes and does this thing. Their business model isn't trained pilots. It isn't people being highly experienced. It's about making the aircraft acquire the data and send it back to where it needs to go. So for me, I think it's got to be eVTOL. It's got to be.
What happened to that thing we had which jumped into the air with legs? Do you remember that, Gary? It was like a cricket.
I saw him he got loads of money, that lad. He got money everywhere, he did. I don't know what happened to it. I met him in Joburg.
Well, when Peter's design...
But we have the expert here, because I bought this crazy plane because of the non-compliance gentleman, and it is 250 grams, and yeah, it's quite easy to make it as an eVTOL. So you just put it like this, and some wiring here, so the propeller won't touch. Ardu pilot, and Bob's your uncle.
Well, I bet you could chuck.
Bob's my auntie since the gender reassignment.
My uncle's actually Rob, not Bob. Sorry.
So
we don't need any of this stuff. Pete solved the problem with his alien drone. It's fine. We won't have to worry about taking off. It'll be able to fly in all directions and hunt us through the woods once it's sold to Boston Dynamics.
Yeah, that hasn't been invented yet, because the mainstream media doesn't exist yet, and that will be brought in. It'll be brought into life soon, and somebody will say, "Look what I have invented! Look how clever I am!"
World first. Yeah.
Yeah,
Elon
somebody will have a world first with that. Mark my words, that hasn't been invented yet. It will. It'll get picked up.
You brought up something interesting, Gary. You brought up Blue SUAS. There's some interesting stuff in that area that probably would make some very good debate and discussion. But there's a particular Swiss company that is telling everyone that if you want to have an SUAS that meets the Blue capabilities, that it must have a particular flight stack on board. The funny thing is that none of the certified ones do. And that's very interesting. The other thing that seems to be going around from a few people is
I can explain you that. The thing is, the ones that don't run PX4, they run their own SEC, are already approved. And as
the ones that run ArduPilot.
And as the ones that PX4 is also inside the Blue SUAS, so they're running from the principle that if you're running PX4, you can be admitted to the Blue.
Yeah, except that the two that were running PX4 have now been removed, so they're no longer certified. So anyway, just to throw that out there, the other one that was of interest, I had someone recently say that. That only autopilots made by that same Swiss company would be certified for US use. I thought that was very interesting too. So we've had some nice chats with US Department of Defense, and they've reassured us that that is not the case, and our autopilots are all good. So yeah.
And I think, was it yesterday the Biden administration brought out a thing about the what made in America really means. It doesn't mean assembled in America. I.e. bits from overseas bought in and assembled. It means a good amount. They're changing the regs on what made in America actually means.
Yeah, I think they're moving to the California regs on that. That's actually going to be very difficult for many. I haven't seen the announcement from yesterday, but from what I understand, it's moving towards the California regs, which is something like 95% has to be US content, whereas in most places like Australia, for example, something is considered made in Australia if it's got 51% content or comes out of the factory in a very different form to how it went in, i.e. if you wanted to build a drone, every component could be made all over the world, but as long as it's all shipped in different things, it comes together, and the actual final assembly is done in Australia with Australian labour, that's made in Australia. And that's been pretty much recognised, I think, across the world. Is more than 50%. Some places are more than 60, 70, whatever. But by the time you put the labour content in, it's pretty easy to get to that level. And that's fair. Whereas California have said, no, hang on a minute. We want made in California to mean it's actually made in California, from the silicon to everything. There is obviously some great use for that for the benefit of the United States. But the reality is that the infrastructure doesn't exist in the United States anymore because they shipped it all to China to actually make a lot of the critical components. So for our Cube Blue, for example, the processor is made in France. Most of the sensors are made in Taiwan. The resistors are made all over the world. The capacitors are made all over the world, blah, blah, blah. Getting American ones of those is very difficult, but the actual full manufacture of the Blue Cube is made in USA. So, you know, from the PCB to all of the pick and place and the assembly and the testing and blah, 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 blah. So we easily meet even the 90% under the costs and all of that sort of stuff. So I do understand why they're doing it. I think they're probably going to go a little bit too far, but that's what normally happens. Good old pendulums. We go from one extreme to the other, and then, you know, in a few years, they'll probably realise that, hang on a second, we've got allies that we like to support. Maybe made over in particular countries is okay as well, blah, 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 and it'll move into the middle.
It's yeah, well, that's the, you know, selling the UK Reapers and then not letting us have the software updates because they fell under ITAR. They can't
a Reaper doesn't fall under ITAR.
You can't have the firmware update.
I haven't kept an eye on that myself. I know there's a lot of it's all layers of abstraction at the end of the day. You know, how far down do you go? You know, you know, is it the chip? Do you go down another layer? How many layers do you go before it's made here, there, or wherever it is? It's interesting because, you know, obviously there's a mass shortage of silicone around the world right now. You know, we've had car manufacturers now starting to shut down production because they can't get chips. You know, it's all very well the US sitting here saying we only want it made in the States. You can't even get it made anywhere else right now, let alone made in the States. So they've got bigger problems than saying we want it from US manufacturers. It's interesting what Philip says about the unnamed company. It's something I've shouted about a lot, that you keep seeing certain things. There was a tweet that was made which vanished so quickly. I wish I'd have taken a screenshot, which out and out said a certain model of drone made in the US was Blue UAS certified, and that tweet can no longer be found anywhere.
I wonder which UTM they use. Begins with an A, I think.
Those shysters called EarMap. Sorry, yeah.
Our lawyers will be in touch.
Yes.
Yeah. Bruce Simpson, my name is. Australia, New Zealand, wherever. It's all the same, isn't it?
You can when the tide's out, you can walk across.
Other islands of the west, east.
But yeah, no, there's a lot of posturing right now from companies that we are the only solution, and you're seeing it through the paywall of PX4 that is now behind it's behind the iron wall or the frozen wall of the north. If you can have it for the community, but if you want it for an industry, we're going to charge you for it. You've got companies trying to rewrite history, and you've got a lot. Look, there's a lot of people being taken on right now. If you look at heads, I think the only company that isn't taking on people left, right, and center is Philip. Philip, what's wrong with you? Right? You've taken no one on from DJI. Everyone else has employed all of DJI's
now. It is actually the law now. You have to have that. That's true.
If you look at these companies are gaining staff at an astonishing rate, but where's the money coming from for that? And you're not seeing product sales. The Node, will say it, I can't think of one aircraft. I can think of one aircraft that has been said that uses it. That's it.
I can name them, but I'm not going to. The thing that I found interesting is that if you look at the help documentation on PX4 now, thanks, Bruce. We're bringing the level of conversation up to that next stage.
Yeah.
If you go to the help documentation now, they have now removed the cube orange and the cube yellow. Cube yellow was made purely for PX4. They've now moved them to the unsupported experimental list. Now, you cannot tell me that that's a commercial move. We've always been community support. I was lead PX4 hardware developer until the whole spat with drone code, and so suddenly, because Chris Anderson doesn't like us and Loren's got a bee in his bonnet, they run us to unsupported hardware, and yet their biggest users that they're so proud about and they're tweeting about all the time are flying cube oranges with PX4, but it's unsupported and experimental, and it's just that sort of commercial bullcrap. Like, we're meant to be open source communities. We don't do that crap. ArduPilot doesn't do that. ArduPilot supports every one of our competitors. Now, took me a little bit of time to grow up and accept that, but
what's like the most popular GPS nowadays for Cube users? Is it still Mission Planner? Is Mission Planner still the winner in that?
On the ground station?
Yeah,
absolutely. Look, there's many people. I mean, Lewis is a big QGC fan, aren't you, Lewis? But we use QGC on the Hearlink as an option, but now ArduPilot now is fairly cross-platform. We're still working on iOS, but we're getting iOS support soon. Now, Mission Planner is not everyone's cup of tea. We've got cut-down versions of Mission Planner, but there's always QGC. We obviously have the Solex on Hearlink as well, because that suits other people as well. We're all for flexibility.
Stay tuned. Soon we'll get the ArduPilot community will get very, very good news. Sooner rather than later. That's for you too, Ian.
You can't say stuff like that and then leave it at that.
Too much detail, Louis.
Yeah.
Well, at the moment, it's all I can say.
No secret.
The pizzas all around. Is that what it is? What is it? What's it going to be? No,
no,
I was just.
Here's the title. You won't believe what happens next. That's the title.
Oh, yeah. Exactly. Yeah. They couldn't believe that. Yes. Local mum makes X from home. Anyway,
Yeah.
People in your area are making, and here I live in Africa, like in the not quite in the middle of nowhere, but like quite far from a lot of places. So when you see all those, it's like, no, really, they don't. They really don't do that around here. It's not how it is. It's not how it is at all. I was just putting my phone up to show that there's mission planners on Android as well now. But can I put a request in while we've got you here, because you're very much working with Michael now on Mission Planner, Philip. Can we have some traditional round dials with some Q&A and QFH and QFE knobs to run, so that I can understand it all a little bit better, and our integration with manned aviation.
I'm sorry, Ian's unfortunately gone, but other Ian. But you know, because he's always on our case for it needs an upgrading graphics and blah 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 blah. And there's a certain level of the community really want us to completely redo it and turn it into QGC. If people want that, there's QGC. But most people are like, please don't change anything because we know how to use it. It's just familiar across the industry. We don't want it to be modernized to whatever the trend is this year. So there's a real difficulty in actually what to do on the UX.
I want to take it back.
Right.
I want to take it back. You don't want to
modernize it. Skin it.
Yeah. There are ins around for various things, but like it's 100% open. People are welcome to do various UX experiences for it, and we'd be more than happy to bring them in. So
good politics.
Is it like a skin API so that people can make their own skins for the underlying?
It's called Visual Studio.
Yeah, I just think we need to start using. I know the trouble is developers don't want to use aviation units as meters per second, kilometers, and all that sort of thing. But we need to. I honestly think we need to start training people in aviation units so that as they're beginning to dibble dabble with aviation, you know.
I think this is one of those long-standing debates that I think was my first conversation where I spoke up on a ArduPilot dev call was on this very topic, where I couldn't understand why we were talking in meters per second rather than knots, and why we were talking in meters of altitude rather than feet. Now, I was quickly reminded that I was living in Australia and that it's only Americans that use this silly imperial stuff. But unfortunately, aviation still uses this silly imperial stuff. And whether we like it or not, that is actually just fact. And if we want to really blend with airspaces, we need to be talking the same language. And, you know, the fighter we want for them to move to metric, it's not going to happen. I mean, look what happens with the confusion of some of the...
it's Taylor Swift on the phone.
Hi, honey, if you're watching, I'm still on.
Sorry.
It's interesting you say that, actually, because literally 2 weeks ago we were having exactly the question about altitude. And, you know, if you're pulling ADS-B data, it's a pressure altitude. But drones work off, you know, height above takeoff point or GPS height, which are completely different. What do we use? Do we use pressure? Do you use altitude above geoid, which I think is
ADS-B tends to use GPS altitude, which is consistent. So when we're doing anything to do with ADS-B side of things or collision avoidance and all of that, we are speaking the same language there. The user of the drone might see it in meters above ground, but in the bowels of what's happening, everything's correctly aligned. So, I mean, there is some of it is just a translate to user level where old school units may exist. But the good thing with GPS is that it's new units. GPS is, you know, always sending the correct.
I like the UK CAA. They use them all. everything, meters and the big mix-up.
No,
and then everyone's happy. Then everyone's happy.
That's an international issue, that is. But I think on the GCS, again, me ranting on about it, would be, for me, for my muggle-minded head, it'd be really nice if we go QFE and then have another altimeter that go QNH or regional pressure setting, because, you know, if we're all going to be flying around Bristol, they'll say the regional pressure setting in Bristol, in the Wessex region, is whatever it is, and I'll just go and set it to that.
How does it go again?
It always, if you don't do that, it doesn't change. It doesn't change. If you don't make the noise, it doesn't work.
And do you want big fonts that are typed very slowly because you don't read fast, or what?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, I do. Yeah. No, it's just a consideration for skin. We've got to start thinking about a more aviation-friendly skin for end users, not people setting the thing up, not people tuning their aircraft, people that are just sat in front of it going, pressing a button and flight following in respect.
And I'd like a hammer that looked like a screwdriver. That'd be really handy for me. Yeah, you can have that. Yeah. Anyway, that's just me.
There was a product testing thing that went up. It was a TikTok that they posted on the RG Pilot group a little while ago. That a little while ago, being yesterday, but anyway. No, it was a lady watching as someone product tested her kid's game, and it was just one of those things that had all the various shapes on top. And, And the person obviously had worked out that every single one of them actually fit through the square hole, depending on how you held it. And it was just, it literally drove the inventor to tears because she was so upset that someone would do that to her product. And that's basically Gary at the moment, with wanting the right units used in the right thing. Even though we can actually successfully do this, it's not the way it should be, and that feels wrong. And
but unfortunately, these things are being presented to aviators a lot now, and an aviator instantly will look at it and go, "That's rubbish. We don't want that." And it's not about what you can or can't do. You know, and aircraft around us are not that up to date. You know, that's the bottom line. Louis is here twice. Why are you here twice, Louis?
We're cloning Louis.
Hang on, he's here 3 times. What's he doing?
and we've got an echo from Louis too.
I think that's probably that, Louis. Is he going to Bristol? No, he's going to Wales. You don't know. You're in the danger areas there for Aberporth.
I can see Ian's house from here.
Tower 1. What's he doing? I wonder if he's supposed to be sharing this with him. I wonder if he's in a call with someone else and he's sharing this to the wrong window. I'm going to quickly.
Be quite funny if this is classified.
Let's just remove that, just for in case. Right. What other stories have we seen? We've been ranting on for nearly 2 hours. What other stories have we seen, gents?
Well, I have. We've all done it, I think. Thanks to Louis.
Yay. We have all done it. But you made it into a little card.
Yeah. So I've got my Yasa A3 and A1.
But that doesn't stand in the UK, does it?
No, it doesn't. But it means if I go to mainland Europe, I can fly in the A3 and the A1.
Just don't forget, you cannot bring a sandwich of ham and cheese because those are forbidden.
Chances are, mind, by doing that, no one in the UK is going to be able to argue with you, short of the CAA. No one's going to understand it.
But yeah, I mean, it's free. It took what? It took about an hour. It's a really good course, isn't it, Louis?
I thought it was. Yeah, I did. I thought it was a good course. I thought it was a good course.
Should we twist Bruce's arm to do the same course?
Yes.
I should do that. Put a link in the description of this video, Gary. Everyone can go and do it if they watch this video.
Bruce. Just A1, A3 certification in Europe. Come on, you'll get the New Zealand CAA so happy.
Does that mean that if I fly BV lost to Europe, I'm covered?
Yeah, you're covered.
Oh, good.
They won't be happy.
I feel sorry for the poor people who have to go and enforce all of this stuff. The police are going to have an absolute nightmare when they go out and they're like, well, is that 249 grams, or is that 450 grams, or is it 700? When they see something flying around in the centre of London, if it's sub 250, it can do pretty much what they want.
That's simple. Shoot it down, and then ask questions.
Surely the remote ID information should have the gross maximum takeoff weight of the craft included in the remote ID, so then they can see if it qualifies for the different categories.
Well, wait till it gets to the transitionals. You're going to sit there and go, well, actually, I'm flying under the A2 transitional category, which I'm allowed to do until the end of this year, officer, because this drone weighs 200 or 300 grams. And they're just going to look at you. As I said, I've said this a few times, I got a discussion with the police. I waited for them to turn up, and they were fantastic guys, but clueless. They didn't have an idea of anything I was talking about.
Just carry the box of the DJI Mini 2 and show them the box. It says right on the box, 249 grams.
Why didn't they write it on the quadcopter? Then it wouldn't matter. But hey, here's a question that I honestly want to know. If I'm standing in one jurisdiction and flying my drone across the border in another jurisdiction, which rules apply?
Both.
If you're standing in New Zealand and you're flying in Australia,
you have to notify the country where you're going to fly to.
We'll send up a ground.
What if you take off in that country? What if you walk across the border, put the drone down, walk back on the other side, and then take off?
Doesn't matter. Airspace is each country has their own authority, so you have to notify both authorities.
What if I want to fly indoors in Australia?
You can't.
That way you just call Philip. You just call Philip.
Yeah, I can fly indoors in Australia. It's all right. I've got my REOC, so I can do a safety case and justify why I'm doing it. And all good.
I heard that you are going to start an underground layer because it's underground, so you can fly underground, right?
No, unfortunately, in Australia, if you want to fly in a mine, that's still a CASA issue.
You never know when you're going to encounter a helicopter.
In many ways, it's actually more realistic because one of the things that America has that really sucks is too many jurisdictions. This is responsible for this.
Yeah.
And this is all over.
Yeah.
At least in Australia, we do have local councils that think that they have some authority over aviation, and slowly we're educating them. But the reality is that CASA has anything to do with anything that flies. That's man-made. Obviously, they don't control the birds yet. But if it's man-made, they manage it, which means when we don't like the regulations, we have one organisation to bitch and moan to, whereas in America, they've got all sorts of different ones all over the place, and local police, and they can make up their own rules, and local councils, let alone homeowners associations. I'm glad I don't have to worry about them.
Well, we've come all the way. We've come all the way round, haven't we? We've come all the way back round to our dear friends at AirMap, because it's exactly what they wanted to get the payment.
Yeah, they want to add their own extra layer in there as well. Yeah,
exactly what they wanted to do. So that strikes me as a very good time to, unless we've got anything else to say. So we've nearly been here 2 hours. We better go.
Yeah. If anyone missed it, I was up against Vic Moss and what's his name, Kenji Sugahara on the Ken Heron show, discussing remote ID and a few other things. So if you didn't see that, it's probably worth a watch.
It is. He was a right antagonist old git on there. Fair play to him. I'll give him credit.
Who, Ken?
Yeah.
and if you watch Geeks Varna, Sean, we're trying to organise a time where I'll go on a stream with him and talk about regulations as well.
Yes, they seem to be out there, don't they? And with that news, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, thank you very much. Thanks for joining us, Philip. Thanks, James. We give you a dig in again. And our usual crowd, thank you very much. Dear viewer, wherever you are in the world, be safe, wear a mask, wash your hands. Stay away from people. We're in this industry, so we have no problem staying away from people.
And don't crash into helicopters.
And don't crash into helicopters. Oh, yeah, whatever's.
Sorry, how many people died in that crash?
Sorry, which one? Oh, that one. Hang on a minute. 0. How many people have died in general aviation accidents in South Africa this year? I think we're over 20 already this year.
I noticed the way people exaggerate the number of deaths due to multi-rotor, recreational multi-rotor flying. I've heard it exaggerated by a factor of 20 just recently.
There you go. All right, we are definitely diverging. Guys, look after yourselves. Everyone else, look after yourselves. Take care. We'll see you next week and daily news at about lunchtime. Cheers for now. Bye-bye.
See you later.